Ooh, welcome back, Weirdos and Weebies, to the channel Dubbish and Doge, where today I am going to be overthrowing the rule of democracy.
What? Mrs. Obama, get down!
It's finally time. You fools! You refuse to pick the correct options. You see, the correct options were Ultraboost plus Crossbow Master and ISAB Monkey. How could you pick the fucking Sentry Champion Polkai and Total Transformation over those? What is wrong with you? Okay, but in all seriousness, these Chimps runs were recorded ages ago, and I've been dying to put them out because these two, so far, are my personal favourites out of all the unpopular Chimps I've done, and considering they've already been sitting in my videos folder for a while now, I want to get them out. So at this point, I'm just going to get these two out, and then we'll go back straight to the voting. Currently, the vote winner for the next one is Bomb Blitz, in case you were curious, although it is very close. If you want to see Grand Saboteur instead, you might be able to flip that vote still, even though it's been going for a while. I see there's a lot more new guys coming in now, because, I mean, the last video currently is at 1.6 thousand views, which is, I think, the best views I've ever gotten on a Bloons video, so that's great to see. Welcome all you new guys. But either way, today we are covering the Ultraboost plus Crossbow Master combo. Now, I want to start straight away by putting all cards on the table. Ultraboost is here for fun, not for optimized play. Ultraboost is a garbage tower in Chimps, practically unusable. It's not just because it's overpriced, although that is obviously a huge part of it. What's even worse is, at least overpriced towers carry you once you buy them. And while Ultraboost technically provides a lot of power, because it only incrementally provides the power it can give over time with ability usages with long cooldowns, it means you usually have to wait another 10 or 15 rounds until after you bought the Ultraboost to really feel the effects of it. When it's already a tower that costs nearly 80k, then that's just not a bullet you can really buy in most situations. Most of the time, it's just, well, shit, guess I'm never affording this, and even if I ever afford it, I'm going to die the next round because I spent 80k on a tower that does nothing but grant me like plus 4% attack speed whenever I use overclock abouts. And sure, once you have 10 stacks, that's actually a good boost. That's a 40% attack speed boost. But when you only have one stack and you've got to wait multiple rounds to get more, it's pathetic. Not to mention you need a strong tower to be getting that boost in the first place for it to be worthwhile. And well, considering how much money you have to throw into an Ultra Boost, you don't really have much money to have any other strong defense aside from an Ultra Boost by the time you have that bought. You know, you don't really have much else to go for. So I know I'm jumping in pretty quick here, but I feel like I have to get that out of the way straight away because I want to make it very clear that this is more a showcase of the Crossbow Master than the Ultra Boost. In fact, me using the Ultra Boost is basically just showing off. It's basically like, look guys, the Crossbow Master's so good, I can get an Ultra Boost and still fucking win. I feel like I should just make that clear because I don't want to put these two in the same position. While they are both unpopular Chimps, I actually do consider the Crossbow Master to be a severely underrated tower, while I consider the Ultra Boost to be very justified in its poor rating. But with all that said, I guess let's actually start from the beginning here this time. We're not going to have much to talk about in terms of strategy on this map because you're going to see that we probably have less towers by the end of this game than in any other unpopular Chimps run I've ever done so far. It already takes so much money to get the Ultra Boost and Crossbow Master in the first place that we have like no money for anything else. As a result, a lot of this video is just going to be talking about the Crossbow Master itself, but I do have a lot to say about it, so that's completely fine by me. So fun fact, when I started Unpopular Chimps, the Crossbow Master was a candidate for a tower I might have covered in my first video. But I ended up not covering it because at the time, I actually realized, while yes, I felt like this tower was very good and underrated, I was kind of struggling to explain why. And I felt like there wasn't much point in me doing an Unpopular Chimps on it if I couldn't really explain why it's underrated. I mean, I had a reason, but the reason just didn't satisfy me. My reason was because it's simply extremely cost-efficient defense for cost that is very independent and reliable and well-rounded. And while that sounds like a fine reason at first, that exact same sort of attribute, that sort of all-rounder good defense for cost tower, has been the exact same thing that I have sort of railed against for many other towers like the Sentry Champion and the Glaive Lord. It's not that these things don't do decent damage for their cost, it's that the way their damage is distributed is extremely inefficient and just generally not good for the job it's meant for. And so I felt like I couldn't just call it a day and say, well, it's just good damage for cost and it doesn't really need much help, so it's good. That felt like it wasn't really the full story. Not to mention, if I was going to do an Unpopular Chimps run on this tower, I'd want to show it off. I'd want it to be my main DPS. But here's the problem. You kinda can't make the Crossbow Master your main DPS. At least not usually. We'll get back to that. But the very reason that the Crossbow Master isn't good as a main DPS tower is because it's so well-rounded. It already does so much damage that giving it more damage buffs has little to no effect. It already shoots fast enough that giving it attack speed buffs isn't super necessary either. It already has enough range to see basically the whole map, and it already has enough pierce that it usually doesn't need more, and while sometimes it does, even if it does need more, giving it a pierce boost is going to be insignificant compared to the amount of pierce it already has, unless you can get a percentage-based pierce boost, but I believe the only percentage-based pierce boosts in the game are Homeland Defense, Shinobi Ninjas, which can only be done on Ninjas, and Populus, which can only be done on Druids. I might be missing one, but that's all that I can think of in that case. And everything else is just a flat number buff. As a result, you can't really buff the Crossbow Master much more than it already is strong. There's not much else you can do to really push it further. But that was an issue, because if the Crossbow Master couldn't solo the game, then I'd have to get another 5th tier to finish things off. And while that could be fine, I could just make an Unpopular Chimps video where I use it for its usual purpose of being a bridge tower to get you through the mid-game, and then use it to get a more expensive 5th tier closer to the end game. That kinda didn't sit right with me. It felt like then what would happen is the video would be more about the tower that I was buying using the Crossbow Master as my mid-game carry, rather than actually being about the Crossbow Master. But, I mean, what can you do to the Crossbow Master to give it that little damage boost it needs to be able to actually carry you through the entire game? Well, obviously you know what I figured out it was, and that would be Ultraboost. Because at the end of the day, the only damage buff that is actually relevant to the Crossbow Master is attack speed. And while it isn't as relevant as it might have been on a slower attacking tower, it's still relevant to the Crossbow Master because attack speed doesn't have diminishing returns like the other kind of buffs do. Giving +1 damage to a tower that already does 30 damage is pitiful. But giving plus 10% attack speed to a tower that already attacks 10 times a second still gives plus 10% attack speed. It doesn't have diminishing returns. So attack speed was our best bet, meaning the Ultra Boost was our best bet to see this tower solo the entire game. And this is why Ultra Boost and Crossbow Master actually mesh together so perfectly for this video. Because Crossbow Master not only is mostly helped by Ultra Boost, and not many other towers in the game can really buff it a whole lot, but on top of that, also, by the same token, Ultra Boost is also a tower which you basically need to use something like Crossbow Master to ever be able to survive to afford. As I said, I think Crossbow Master's job is to be an effective mid-game carry that allows you to save up literal tens and hundreds of thousands of cash without dying in chimps just by surviving on its own for that long, allowing you to get stupidly powerful 5th tiers, which is exactly what we need for the Ultra Boost. Because of course, the main problem with Ultra Boost is not only how expensive it is, but the fact that even once we finally buy it, we're still vulnerable for a few rounds. So we need a really good mid-game carry to buff with this. And that's exactly what the Crossbow Master is. But while it's all fair enough saying it's a good mid-game carry, let's explain actually why it's a good mid-game carry. You see, this is where the whole well-rounded thing comes in. If you didn't know, the Crossbow Master can not only see camo, but also pop lead once you get it to 5th tier. So it's got camo lead popping. You don't really need an MIB village, you don't need alchemists, you don't need any of that. You can just get the Crossbow Master on its own. It also does enough damage that it's really, really good at cracking open Moabs. But it also has enough pierce that it's fine with also being able to crack open the ceramic insides of Moabs up to about the 90s. And thanks to its extremely fast attack speed and enormous range, it very, very rarely actually lets anything leak. In fact, basically the only time that the Crossbow Master will finally give in and maybe let something leak is if they have so many ceramics to deal with they actually get pierce capped. But even then, the Crossbow Master can deal with 63. It has to be a truly enormous amount of ceramics to finally pierce cap it. Now that's not to say that it won't happen. Again, once you get to the 90s, you will start seeing some rounds where it will get pierce capped. But the 90s is a long way away. And if this tower is able to hold its own for that long, provided you give it some support, then yeah, I think I've made my case pretty strongly. This is an amazing mid-game carry. And while usually towers that aren't good with support are bad because support options make this game very strong, you know, Alchemist with Recursive Cluster, Alchemist with Bouncing Bullet, primary mentoring village with like ices or tax, you know, these are all extremely powerful combos for good reason. But here we actually have the one case where being an independent tower is extremely effective. When you have something like the Crossbow Master, which you're not getting it to have the most damage possible, you're getting it to have the cheapest carry tower that you can get. The fact that the crossbow doesn't really need a village, the fact that the crossbow doesn't really need an alchemist buff, saves you thousands in cash as a result. Genuinely, this is something that you're not often made to really think about, but just getting a stronger stimulant alchemist costs about 6,500 in cash if you're getting all the upgrades, and then when you combine that with even just a jungle drums village, just jungle drums alone is another 3,500, that's 10,000 you're spending right there, which is almost half the cost of the Crossbow Master itself. This means that with a lot of other 5th tiers, while they might have a 20k price tag or whatever, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're badly priced, a lot of the time it's not really 20k, because then a lot of these 5th tiers also basically need to be run with villagers to see their full potential or with alchemists. Tax Zone being a great example. Again, not saying Tax Zone is bad, that's not my point here. My point here is rather that usually you're not really paying 20,000 for a Tax Zone. You're paying 20,000 up front, but then you're also paying 3,500 for the Jungle Drums village, and that's assuming you stop at Jungle Drums. You're probably going for primary mentoring if it's a Tax Zone. And then you're also going to be getting, you know, a 420 alchemist or something like that. And that means that, you know, in reality, you're spending 30,000 at least. Whereas with the Crossbow Master, it truly is just 23k, and that's where it stops. Even when super ceramics come, don't get me wrong, it gets a little bit scary, but it's honestly not even that bad for the Crossbow Master. It does mean they don't one-shot ceramics anymore, but they don't take many shots to kill ceramics, and they do already shoot really fast. And also, super ceramics reduce the amount of balloons on screen. That's why they have increased health. They don't split anymore. And that means that technically your shots take up less pierce, which means that in some ways the super ceramics are actually kind of a blessing for this tower, because again, the one time this tower gets overwhelmed is when it gets pierce capped. So generally, super ceramics aren't much of a problem for this tower. They're definitely a little scary and you'll always have to keep an eye on them, but compared to how much they mow through other towers, honestly, the Crossbow Master puts a really good fight up against them considering how cheap of a 5th tier it is. Effectively, once you have a Crossbow Master on the screen, you will never have to worry about anything smaller than a Zomg ever again, and even then, just 1 or 2 Zomgs it can handle on its own. And when you also factor in the fact that, reminder, there are only 2 fortified Zomgs in all of Chimps mode, and they're on 97, that means that you don't really see many balloons that can actually be too tough for the Crossbow Master to take down until, once again, the late 90s when you start seeing more Zomgs, and even then with support it can take down the Zomgs, and so from there the only thing that can really challenge it is stuff on 97 and 100. Once again, so late in the game that obviously it's not really much of a concern because you should have something else by that time anyway. I mean, hell, even DDTs, don't get me wrong, you should not use Crossbow Master as your only DDT defense, but it definitely does a damn good job of softening them up to make it so that you can go a little bit cheaper on your DDT defense for the rest of them, even though you will still have to invest a little bit extra into being able to deal with DDTs, unless you're planning to, like here, just Ultra Boost the Crossbow Master. With all that said, that's almost it, so I guess there's just the extras to talk about as usual here. Once again, there's not really anything to say about the strategy because there's barely any towers besides the Crossbow Master, our hero, and the Ultraboost. And the few we do get are pretty self-explanatory. Primary mentoring at some point, we get a glue storm at the end, we get glue, like Moab glue. I don't remember if we got a snowstorm or not, I think we did. Yeah, just typical slow stuff, you know, typical damage boost stuff. Nothing that surprising. In terms of the hero themselves, I picked Churchill, which is rare. I very, very rarely use this hero just because I feel like while they are very effective when you have monkey knowledge, thanks to the +1 damage to ceramics and Moab's monkey knowledge for heroes, which is really good with Churchill's machine gun. When you use him in a Chimps run, I feel like he's a little bit underwhelming a lot of the time. And the fact that he has no real synergies and no real, like, you know, he's not got any support abilities like most heroes do, I feel like it really holds him back, especially when the few heroes that are all DPS are really stiff competition. You know, Sorta for just cost efficiency, slap it down and it does the job kind of stuff. Sorta is usually like the queen of that. If you're talking cheapest option, then Quincy kind of wins out. If you're talking option that's best for dealing with super ceramics, then Psy wins out. If you're talking best for damage, I feel like honestly Adora beats him a lot of the time. I feel like the main thing that Churchill has going for him is that by being the most expensive hero, he's the one that allows you to get the most value out of your XP, which technically is a way that you can get more defense without having to spend money. So that's why he's being used here. because we're penny pinching so hard this run that we want to use Churchill, because we don't mind paying a little bit extra up front to get more power in the long term out of our hero, so that we have more money by the end of the game to use on Ultraboost and Crossbow Master. Also, just generally, Churchill is a pretty independent hero, which is important because we're not getting a whole lot of support in this run, because that's the whole point of Crossbow Master. So we needed to get a hero that had camo-led defense like Churchill does, that has pretty good single target, but also pretty good group target like Churchill does. You get the point. And also Churchill himself is not a bad Ultra Boost target, which obviously we swapped to Ultra Boosting Churchill once we run out of stacks to put onto the Crossbow Master, which even then, by the end of this run, we only get him to 6 stacks. We only managed to get 16 uses of Ultra Boost before the end of the game, even penny pinching as hard as we did here, which helps to demonstrate just how devastating it is to Ultra Boost's viability, that it takes so long to get the benefit when you already had to just barely escape death just to be able to afford it in the first place. As for the map, it's Quiet Street, not much to say. This map is an intermediate map, which is usually a bit easier than I like to go for these challenges. But quite frankly, yeah, Ultra Boost is so bad, I think I need to do an intermediate map. Well, I say that. Even though this is an intermediate map, I was still expecting this one to be a bit tough, just because I thought Ultra Boost would be that much of a dead weight. But I'm not going to lie, this was a first attempt run. It seemed to go pretty smoothly. It's certainly possible that maybe I could have tried some advanced maps with this and it would have gone just fine. But either way, this run is already a little bit memey because we're getting Ultra Boost in the first place, and I feel like I'm already kind of making my point here pretty well, so I don't really see any point in re-recording this on a harder map. I also just felt generally this map looked like it'd be pretty good for Crossbow Master because, you know, it's kind of awkward being able to see far enough to like get all lanes on this map. And obviously the range of Crossbow Master helps a lot with that. Also, I'm not gonna lie, I fucking hate the early game on this map. And being able to just go straight for crossbows made it easier. So, you know, I wanted to use Crossbow Master for this map because I thought that would make it less painful to get through the early game instead of having to set up a tower that isn't super good early game but is better late game on a map where early game it's really hard to set up, even if it's not a really super hard map once you get past the early game. Either way, I hope I've made my point. I really feel like the Crossbow Master is a severely underrated upgrade. Honestly, I feel like the whole crossbow path for the Dart Monkey is underrated. Just the whole path is extremely well-rounded and just simply works well as the game progresses. Like, by the time you could afford tier 3 is around the time that pinks and yellows are coming. And the fact that it does 3 damage per shot while having decent pierce makes it really, really effective against them. By the time you can afford Sharpshooter, you're going into round 40, at which point Sharpshooter is one of the best options in the game just to get a quick, okay, I need something to kill the Moab on 40. Like, this isn't going to be part of my permanent defense or anything, like it's not part of my plan, I just need something cheap that can kill the Moab on 40, otherwise I die. I feel like Sharpshooter is extremely good for that, and that's also a relatively cost-efficient upgrade. The only bit that's a little bit rocky is making the jump from Sharpshooter to Crossbow Master, but even then, compared to most 5th tiers, it is an easy jump to make, and once you make that jump, as I say, you can survive so long with just the Crossbow Master. So I feel like just as independent, cost-efficient defense, I really feel like the bottom path Dart Monkey is the single best tower in the entire game for that. I don't know, it just seems like a perfect cost/power curve for the tower. That bottom path just seems every upgrade is the right price at the right time with the right power level to just let you get through huge chunks of the game without having to spend a whole bunch of money. Either way, that closes out this Unpopular Chimps. Wait, bonus section. So the main reason I said I couldn't be bothered to try this on a more difficult map, now that I've already done it, was because I thought to myself, well, I'd probably want to show it off on like either a very hard advanced map that's like kind of considered spiritually expert by the community, like X Factor or Geared, or I'd want to do it on, you know, an expert map. But the thing is, to be honest, the early game on a lot of these maps is so torturous that I don't want to go through it a lot of the time. This is honestly the main reason why I don't bother trying to beat a lot of expert maps on Chimps. It's just because I literally can't be fucking bothered to get through the early game. I mean, how many expert maps out there literally require pixel-perfect placements and targeting micro just to get past the first few rounds? And I want to make it clear, I'm not trying to make the argument, oh yeah, I could beat all these maps on Chimps, no problem if it just wasn't for that. Nah, for the especially difficult maps like Ravine and Bloody Puddles, I imagine that I probably would struggle to beat them even if I didn't have to deal with the extremely difficult early game. But certainly for more of the, I guess, quote-unquote medium expert maps like Ouch, Muddy Puddles, and I guess Workshop would probably fall into that category as well. A lot of the maps like that, I feel like the main barrier for entry for me is the early game. However, I finally got around to doing something I really should have started doing a while ago. I looked up a chimps money chart to know how much money you have by the end of each round in a game of chimps, since it can't change obviously because there's no way to make money. And I decided, well, who says I have to deal with the extremely tedious and painful early game? How about I just start from a round where I can afford the Crossbow Master and go from there? And yes, obviously that does mean I technically have a teensy bit more money than I should have, quote unquote, because of the fact that I'm not wasting money on towers that I would need to get to beat the early game. But that only amounts to like 2,000 or 3,000 over the course of a full chimps run, which by the end of a chimps run, I think it was 178,000 cash you have by the end, so yeah. But yeah, I do have a bit of an advantage here. It is cancelled out a little bit by the fact I also get less hero XP, but definitely more of an advantage than a disadvantage. That being said, for the most part, this is still essentially a chimps run on an expert map. And thankfully, because this is challenge editor, I have retry from last round, which makes this 10,000 times less tedious. Honestly, it kind of makes me sad how every single time I get sick of this game, the second I play challenge editor and I've retried last round, I'm like, oh wait, this is why I like this game. It sure sucks that I literally earn nothing in-game for playing in challenge editor. I know I don't shut up about this, but seriously, I do not understand why retry last round can't be a thing in all modes. I know it makes it easier, but it doesn't actually, you know, make the whole challenge any easier. Technically, it's more just a convenience thing. It's more just a, I don't have to spend an hour restarting thing. I mean, we already have black borders if you want to be purists about what counts as a real chimps run. Anyway, whatever, this isn't a video about that. Either way, I was curious how long the Crossbow Master would hold out on this map. Obviously, it wouldn't hold out as long as it would on any intermediate or advanced map, because obviously the track is shorter on this map, and if you didn't know, the conveyor belt in the center does actually speed up balloons. Balloons are faster on Workshop than they are on most maps. So either way, round 47 is the first round in chimps where you could possibly afford a Crossbow Master. Again, in a real chimps run, you probably would have to wait 1 or 2 extra rounds because of the fact that you would have to spend other money on getting other defense, but it wouldn't be that much longer. Now, I did say that part of the reason it's so cost efficient is not needing a whole bunch of support, and you could say, ooh, I'm breaking the rules here by getting support towers. But my counter to that would be, not only that these are support towers you will get every game for the most part, at least in my experience, I certainly end up getting things like Relentless Glue and Snowstorm basically every chimps run I do. But beyond that, because it's not a buff, it's a, you know, slowdown or a freeze on, like, Moabs, that means that it's essentially a benefit every single tower gets. It's not a buff that you just got for the Crossbow Master. As a result, I feel like it's fair to include these, because again, let's be real, you're getting these every chimps run. Of course, I'm going for an 025 here, since that's the more popular cross path. I did try with a 205, the PS cross path, and I'll get back to that in a moment. But before I say that, the 025 managed to get to round 87 with this defense before it needed extra help with actual, you know, DPS towers, not just like slows. Round 87 is 4 Zongs, which is just too much for this thing to handle. As I say, it actually can deal with Zongs if there's only 1 or 2 of them, but by the time there's more than 2 of them, it really starts to struggle. Again, this thing is really good at dealing with anything BFB or smaller, but once you get bigger than BFB, it starts to really struggle. Now, you can get even further than that by getting an overclock, and obviously overclocking your Crossbow Master, but, well, I wouldn't recommend it. Because the next obstacle that will stop your Crossbow Master is round 91, and there overclock doesn't save you. Round 91 is a rare round to die to, but in this case it makes sense, because all it is a bunch of really tightly clumped BFBs. Usually by this point in the game, this isn't a super big concern, since most 5th tiers have very high amounts of Pierce. But obviously the Crossbow Master is one of the few 5th tiers where, because of how cheap it is actually in danger of getting Pierce capped, at least once you're this late into the game. And because Pierce is the problem here, not attack speed, while Overclock helps, it is not enough to deal with this round, not even really that close even. Either way though, that's a tower that only costs about 26k in total, like for all the upgrades, not just like the Crossbow Master upgrade, that on its own is capable of dealing with rounds 47 through to 87. That's literally nearly half the game. Now, if I was doing this on an advanced or an intermediate map, I would obviously show off by trying to get an especially expensive 5th tier, something that costs 50k or more, something like a Permabrew or something. But we kind of already did that by doing the Ultraboost segment of the video, and of course this is an expert map, so we can't really fuck around as much. But I still use this tower to be able to afford an especially expensive 5th tier, at least by the standards of expert maps where you really can't go all too long without having to spend your money before you die. That being a tower that I've been tempted to include in a video, but definitely isn't an unpopular chimp, at least not anymore, and that would be the Carpet of Spikes. Again, it's not ludicrously expensive, but at 43,000, it's a little bit difficult to get without some kind of mid-game carry. Again, if you're playing an advanced or an intermediate map, probably not so much, but if you're playing a map like this, yeah, it's going to be quite difficult to save up for it. So yeah, I decided to do a follow-up run where I actually treat it like a proper chimps run, again, just starting from that sort of starter round, and essentially make Carpet of Spikes sort of my build-around endgame tower while using the Crossbow Master to help thin out the horde so it doesn't have all its spikes eaten up. And sure enough, this was able to beat Workshop Chimps, although of course I'm using Retry Last Round a lot here because I'm sort of messing around seeing what I can get. And also I didn't really go in with much of a plan here, this is more just kind of like, yeah, let me try something. Oh cool, it works. Definitely had a lot of trouble on 98, but that's nothing that some unstable concoctions can't fix. And we had a decent amount of leftover money this run too. So yeah, the last thing I guess I'll mention is just tying up some loose ends about these little extra runs. First of all, you might be wondering, of course, what round the Crossbow Master gets to without any support. And obviously that's nowhere near as far, mostly because this is actually one of the few maps where round 63 does kill the Crossbow Master. The ceramics are just too fast on this map. Again, on most maps, it's able to deal with them, but once you get to expert maps, it kind of doesn't deal on its own. Even then, it seems if you just get the right crits at the right time, it's possible for the Crossbow Master to beat this round, but obviously you don't really want to be relying on that luck. All you need is a snowstorm to make this possible, though. Oh, I just realized I didn't mention Sai yet. Yeah, I just got Sai because obviously if you're doing a real chimps run, you're going to be getting a hero. And I thought, okay, what's a hero that I'm actually going to use when beating an expert map on chimps, but also isn't necessarily a hero that's like super synergistic and it's like, oh, you could only, like, I'm using this to buff my Crossbow Master or whatever. It's just a pure DPS hero. And obviously Sai fit the bill for that. That being said, you might be wondering, I brought up the Pierce crosspath earlier. If Pierce is a problem and the reason why it needs a bit of help on 63, then what about the Pierce crosspath? Wouldn't that be better? I mean, it seems like whenever we have an issue, it's because we're getting Pierce capped. I mean, maybe the Pierce crosspath could even beat 91, and that was the point where we finally got stopped with the original run. Well, the Pierce crosspath does make it so that the Crossbow Master can go all the way to 80 with 0 support. However, then it really starts to drop off. Because of the lowered attack speed, it's even worse against Zongs, and can't even really deal with even small amounts of them without a lot of help. Not to mention, while it still can kill BFBs, it kills them slower, which means the longer that the BFBs come out, the more the Crossbow Master slowly starts to lose ground. So if it sends enough of them uninterrupted non-stop, eventually it starts to struggle. It's probably the case, although I didn't test this far, I admit, that if you get an overclock with it, that the Pierce crosspath is better. But certainly in terms of pure just slap it down, see how far it gets, even when placed in a good spot where it often does max out its Pierce, you still want the attack speed crosspath more often than not. And while overclock would likely make the Pierce crosspath better, at the point where you're also buying overclock, again, you're not necessarily saving a whole bunch of money anymore. Now in fairness, that overclock doesn't have to be used on the Crossbow Master, you can use it on the Crossbow Master initially and then move it to your better 5th tier at the end game. However, in my experience, it seems like it's hard to even afford another 5th tier if you get all this support, throw all this money into the Crossbow Master, and then also try and get another 5th tier that's even better. I mean, I'm certain it's possible, but certainly it doesn't seem like it's very practical. I thought Workshop would probably be the best map to test this out, not only because it's got long straight lines for the Crossbow Master, but also because, to be honest, a lot of expert maps have water, and in fairness, I do think if you have water, you have better options. The Crossbow Master is still cheaper than these, but only by a little bit, and I do think that Flagship Carrier, arguably Sub-Commander, and definitely Pirate Lord are examples of mid-game carries that probably do better, although sometimes they do need small amounts of support, like how the Pirate Lord doesn't have camera detection unless you take the bad cross path. Or, you know, I guess the same goes for the aircraft carrier, although I suppose now there's an argument that the bottom crosspath actually is better than the top one. Well, depending on the situation, it seems that the Grapes crosspath is stronger with dealing with single targets, whereas if you just need to deal with loads of Moabs all over the screen and need high PS, it does seem like the bottom crosspath is better now. Either way, yeah, if you're playing on a map with water, a lot of the times those are going to be more appealing options than the Crossbow Master, but of course Workshop doesn't have any water. So it seems like the perfect expert map to show off this tower, because I don't know what other sort of mid-game tower that costs the same amount as the Crossbow Master or even thereabouts that is able to defend for this long without any outside help except slows that you're likely to get anyway. With all that said, thank you for watching for real this time, and I'll see you in the next one. Soon we shall all face the wrath
of the Ice Monkey.